Hey guys, sorry I couldn't be here today. So instead of leaving you to do a brainstorm totally independently, I've done a guided version of what we would have done in class today. So just follow along, and I will ask you at some points to pop into your writing portfolio to add some things in, and that way we can all be prepared for tomorrow. So today we're going to be talking about themes and textual evidence. So the first thing you need to know is that the theme of a story is the central message or some insight into life that's revealed through literature. The hard part is that the theme of To Kill a Mockingbird is implied. It's not directly stated. Harper Lee never says, "This is what I wanted you to learn from this book." So we need to think about what the characters are going through and learn from their experiences without anyone telling us what to look for. So today we're going to talk about how to find the theme in a piece of literature. Your prompt for paragraph 2, which is why I'll ask you to go back into your portfolio, is to choose one of those real-life lessons, one of the themes we've seen in the text, and explain how you know that that's a theme in the text. So in some ways it's easier than our last prompt. You're just talking about one lesson, but in this one we'll focus on finding excellent textual evidence and using it well. First, though, we need to find a theme. So the first step is to come up with some of the subjects that we see in the text. Things like friendship, racism, family. Once you've figured out the subject, you need to think about what the author is saying about that subject, how it relates to real life, or the insight into human nature that it gives us. So instead of saying that friendship is a theme, friendship is actually more of a subject, but what we learn about friendship is a theme. So a true friend is one that sticks by you in tough times, is an example of a theme. So we're going to look at a couple different stories, and I'm condensing some of the class discussions I've had in the past week to give you guys an idea of how to do this. So for example, in Goldilocks and the Three Bears, really simple story, we have a couple different topics. We have boundaries, theft, bad decisions, the idea of things being just right. But those aren't themes in and of themselves. However, we do get the insight that bad decisions have consequences. Because Goldilocks breaks into the house and steals their food and breaks their stuff, she gets in trouble. In some versions, she's just chased out of the house. She gets a good scare. In other versions, she's eaten. So, depending on who you read. We also learn that breaking other people's boundaries is wrong, but that people tend to push the boundaries of others when they want something. So Goldilocks is hungry and she's tired, and she probably knows that it's wrong to break into someone's house and eat their food and sleep in their bed, but she needs the food and she needs the bed, so she breaks that rule. We also learn, they're not all negative, that sometimes we need to explore some options before we find what we like or need. She needs to try the porridge that's too hot. She needs to try the porridge that's too cold, and then she finds the one that's just right. So sometimes we don't always stick with what we start with. Sometimes we need to try things out. In Cinderella, we might see topics like love, topics like family, jealousy, but Cinderella is a more complicated story. So when we see the topic of family, sometimes a story will teach us that family are the only ones you can really depend on. That's not what we learn from Cinderella. Her family is pretty toxic. They treat her badly. She still does what they tell her to do. So you may have loyalty to your family, but that might not be healthy. That might be something we learn, that people tend to be loyal to their families even if that family is bad for them. When it comes to love, yes, Cinderella experiences love at first sight, but it's almost accidental, whereas her stepsisters are trying really hard to get the prince to fall in love with them, and it doesn't work. So maybe we learn about love, that love is not something you can force into happening. It's something that needs to occur naturally. One of the things we might learn from the Three Little Pigs is that hard work pays off. We know that being lazy has consequences for the first two brothers who build their houses out of straw and sticks. Now, fairy tales are fairly easy to look at the themes of because they have almost an expressed moral. They'll usually end with some sort of lesson, right? So hard work and planning pays off for the last little pig. He's the only one who's able to defeat the wolf. Then we get into more complicated stories. Things like Moana, where there are a lot of different relationships at play, a lot of different complicated characters, especially in Maui, who's more of a trickster than a hero. He's sort of both, the good guy and the bad guy. So it addresses topics like family and loyalty and leadership in more complicated ways. So one of the things that she learns is that sometimes people need to find themselves by losing themselves. You know, she needs to leave her home, she needs to leave her family, she needs to almost give up before she figures out what she needs to do. She also learns that appearances can be deceiving. She thought of Maui as this bad guy, this trickster who stole everything from humans, but at the same time, he saw himself as the hero in that narrative. He was trying to do something good for humans, and he accidentally did something damaging. So sometimes people who have the best intentions still mess up. That's something else. That would be another theme that we learn. So if you think about To Kill a Mockingbird, we see a lot of different topics in the text. We see things like friendship, racism, maturity and growing up. We see family dynamics at play. There's a lot of confrontation. There is sexism or gender roles, people being treated differently because of their gender. And there's definitely the idea of justice, like what is justice? When does justice happen and not happen? So if we think about some of the lessons we learn about those things, I developed sort of a working list. Okay. So one of the things we learn about maturity, for example, is that all people get older, but not everyone becomes more mature. I think we can all think of someone who's older than us, but acts younger than us, right? And we see that in the story. We also see that childhood is something that people cling to, even if after they're forced to grow up. So one good example is how Scout, who's being asked to behave in very adult ways, to not start fights, she kept her head about Mrs. Dubose. She crawls into Atticus's lap. She wants to be held like a little kid, even though she's had to act very grown up that day. We also learn that sometimes it's not how long we've been alive, but it's what we've lived through that causes us to grow up. Jem and Scout have become very mature over the past couple chapters just because of what they've had to go through. We see that friendship becomes less important as we grow older. Atticus, Miss Maudie, they have neighbors, they have acquaintances, but Atticus doesn't have a confidant like Scout has Jem or like Scout has Dill. Those friendships have become less important. They are more independent as people. We also see that justice is complicated. Sometimes there is no justice. Sometimes things are just unfair, and that's the way life is. People want to see justice. They want things to be fair. That's why Scout is so upset when she's punished for being smart at school. But that's the same reason why Atticus needs to fight for Tom Robinson. Even though he knows that justice will not actually be served, he needs to make that point. We've also learned that people tend to follow a crowd, especially if it's easier than doing what is right. We see this with all of the people in town and the way that they're treating Atticus. He is well respected, but he is not treated well. His children especially are not treated well once he takes on this case. We see that doing the right thing is worth it. Atticus really points that home, even if you are fighting a losing battle, and that punishment without cause is not justice. So Atticus talks about the fact that it's a sin to kill a mockingbird because they don't do anything wrong. It's not right to hurt something that has done nothing wrong. But we've also seen examples where people or animals have been punished when they haven't really done anything wrong. Tim Johnson, for example, the dog with rabies, is shot even though it's not his fault that he has rabies. He was just being a dog. We see Scout punished That's not really an example of justice. But she is punished for being ahead in school. And so there are a lot of examples of all of these in the text. And there are more lessons that we learn. So the first thing I need you to go ahead and do, you can pause your video, is add a theme, either one of these or one of your own creation, into your writing portfolio. So under paragraph 2, where it talks about theme, just pick a lesson and type that in. When you're done, come on back. The next thing you need to think about is supporting your ideas with textual evidence. So I want you to think about 3 events in the story that portray the theme you chose. So say we're talking about childhood, how we cling to it. Find 3 examples of someone wishing they were younger, wishing they could act more immaturely. And as you brainstorm, write those events into your writing portfolio. Preferably, you want word for word snippets. So you want to take actual textual evidence, quotes from the text. Once you've copied your quotes in, you need 3. You want to make sure that the quotes you're using are the best to support what you're saying. So choosing the best evidence is honestly more important than having exact quotes. So, for example, this is an example from Speak. Okay, but if my topic sentence were Melinda's outlook becomes so bleak that she sees no future for herself, there are 3 examples that show that Melinda's outlook is very bleak, that she's definitely depressed. So there's maybe I'll be an artist if I grow up on page 78. I put the gown back. There's nothing wrong with me. These are really sick people, sick that you can see on 113. And then there's a description of her mutilating herself, of cutting herself with a paperclip. And that's at about page 180. So all of these show that Melinda is upset, that she's in a bad place. But the one that best shows that she sees no future for herself is A. So when Melinda says, if I grow up, right here, she's implying that she doesn't see a future in which she's still alive, in which she becomes an adult, gets out of high school. The other 2 definitely show that her outlook is bleak, but we want to make sure we're supporting our exact topic sentence. So go back to your evidence and make sure that it's the best evidence it could possibly be, and then your job is done for today. So by the time you come back to class next time, I need you to have the theme that you will write about and 3 pieces of evidence that support that theme in your writing portfolio document. Thank you guys for listening to me talk. Have a great day. I will see you when I get back on Tuesday.